I sit here on this iconic day in news history, just like the coverage of the O.J. Simpson car chase and the moon landing and 9/11. I have no doubt that this broadcast will go down in history as a moment that will define our times for thousands of years. The moment Natalia was on Dr. Phil. She's just a little girl. All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to True Crime Loser. I hope you're doing well this morning. So after weeks of the whole world being glued to this story, is she a neglected teen? Is she a violent old dwarf? Is she missing? Is she from Ukraine? All of a sudden, the news broke that she was going to be on Dr. Phil. And I think everyone pretty much tuned in for two reasons. One, to decide if she's as young as she says she is. And two, whether she's telling the truth. So let's just get into it. So after weeks of build-up and halfway respected news sources saying that she was missing and no one's seen her, she walked out on the Dr. Phil set. And I gotta say, I think she looked pretty good. She looked healthy, which was, which is good. When they set things up with a neglected teen or an evil con woman dwarf, I didn't know how she was gonna look, But she looked healthy, she looked well fed, she had a full, thick head of hair that was great, and she looked good. And to me, she looked older. She's claiming right now she's 16, and I think that is crazy. She has an adult face, an adult jaw, and even like her facial expressions is the way that she kind of interacts with Dr. Phil. With her facial expressions, she doesn't seem 16. What do you guys think? And also, too, Dr. Phil asked her, how old are you supposed to be right now? And she goes, 16. And you can tell even she thinks that that's totally ridiculous to say. It's like one of those lies that 2 years ago maybe worked, but as she's getting older and everything, it just starts to feel... How old are you? Yeah, 16. I think it was even hard for her to say it. But I could be wrong. Listen, I don't know. I'm not an age expert or a dwarf expert. So what's crazy, and I kind of felt like this was probably going to happen, is I don't think there was really any answers given. And that's just the type of case this is. It will probably go down in folklore with no answers. Every time I thought there was going to be answers, there's going to be a Dr. Oz episode. Her pastor's going to be on. All right, this is it. There's always a few things that it's like, okay, she's an adult. And then, there's a few things, maybe she's a kid. And then the episode ends and you're like, all right. And she walks off into the sunset. So still, after all of this, I don't even know if I know one thing is for sure in this case. Like they say she's from Ukraine. She probably is, but do you know for sure? I don't know. They say her Ukrainian mother came forward. Is that really her, or is it just some weird Ukrainian woman? Could be. Are the Barnetts victims of an evil con woman? I don't know. Are they the nut jobs that wanted to abandon this child person that they adopted in order to nurture the genius of their other autistic child? I don't know. Is she really 16? I don't know. A bunch of doctors have said one thing, a bunch of doctors have said another thing, and a bunch of doctors have said, you can't tell. She's got because of her condition, you just can't tell. Which sets up if she is a con woman, and this whole thing is a big con, part of the genius of it is that if you go against her, you're going against a kid. So if you're like, you're a con woman, she can just be like, no, I'm not. And then it's like, oh my God, is she a kid? Like Dr. Phil, I think, especially by the end, was totally on her side. I think she got Phil hook, line, and sinker. He's sitting there being like, well, I don't care how old she is. And I get it, unless she's a con woman. And also, you can't just hang out in the adoption world forever. Sounds like she's doing great with this family. That's awesome. I'm happy for him. Let that just keep on rolling. But I don't know if it can just chalk it up to, it doesn't matter. All right, so let's get into the interview. Something that is very suspicious, in my opinion, is the family before the Barnetts. So the Barnetts, as most of you know, have came out and said she tried to poison Christine Barnett's coffee. She tried to kill their sons in a few different ways. She tried to push Christine Barnett into an electric fence. These are all allegations. Push her into an electric fence, and then also that she was stashing knives everywhere. I'm a little knife stasher. And Dr. Phil asked her about all of those. Except he worded the questions as easily as possible for her to lie, and then didn't push at all after the first initial answer. And I think that goes back to, with this one, everyone's trying to play it safe, because it's like, well, if she's not an evil dwarf, then she's a kid, and I don't want my career, Dr. Phil's probably thinking, like, I should just act, even if I don't believe it, I'm just going to say, hey, kid, no worries, and then just move on. No one wants to be the person that is accusing a kid. But it comes out that I didn't know, the family before, Natalia said she was with 30 families. And if she's only 16 years old, that's not long with each family. And then Dr. Phil was like, you've been with 30 families? And she was like, oh, I don't know. That's what Christine said. I'm confused. And anytime she's pushed to explain something, like, hey, explain this, it's always like, oh, I don't know. I'm just young and confused. But he asked her about the knives. And in all of the interviews that I've heard, the Barnetts have said that she stashed knives in the couch, and she stashed knives, all these different places. But I never heard him say on top of the fridge. But Dr. Phil, I don't know where he got that. He comes out and was like, Natalia, did you stash knives on top of the fridge? And it's such an easy answer. She goes, no, I couldn't reach on top of the fridge, not even with a chair. And Dr. Phil's like, that's right. You couldn't. That's crazy. And that's it. That's it for the knives. And it's like, that was easy. And then he goes, did you pour bleach in Christine's coffee? And Natalia goes, it was lemon pledge. So it's not like, no, that's crazy, Christine this, or, I have no idea what she's talking about. It's like, did you pour bleach in your coffee? She's like, no, it was lemon pledge. And every time that she gets accused of doing something crazy and violent, the first thing that she brings up is her disability. It started to remind me of, what's his face, Fat Ridge, To Catch a Predator guy. Every time it started to get where he started to look bad, he'd just be like, well, my claw hurts or something. And Natalia's the same way. So they're like, did you do something to Christine's coffee? And she's like, it was lemon pledge. Here's what happened. I was cleaning the table and I missed a spot. I moved her coffee and I was spraying this lemon pledge. And even that, it's kind of a dick move. Like, even if she wasn't trying to murder Christine, you can't just be spraying pledge with my coffee sitting right there. Even if she wasn't trying to kill me, I'd been like, Natalia, what are you doing? Give me a sec. I'll set my coffee over there. You're spraying this aerosol shit everywhere. So she was like, we missed a spot. Oh, first she was like, I had to pull up a chair because I'm so short. And Dr. Phil's like, oh. And then she was like, we missed a spot. So I moved her coffee and I was spraying and I was working hard as the disabled cleaner woman. And I was cleaning and it hurt. Everything hurt. And Christine came in and was like, what are you doing? And so, is Christine the nut job here? Or is it Natalia? We don't know. And she also, along with immediately bringing up her disability when she's accused of extreme violence, I'm so short, or I couldn't even reach it, or another thing that she does is she has a much different speed when she starts explaining things away. The other times when she talks slowly in a nice pace, and it communicates with facial expressions as she goes. And then as soon as it's like, did you poison this woman? It's a lot of, oh, well, I couldn't reach because of, I'm short. And she goes into this speed. I wrote down lying speed. I don't know if she's lying, but it's definitely a different speed than a lot of the other things she talks. And it's the same thing when she talks about the pushing Christine in the electric fence. They're like, did you push Christine into electric fence? And she was like, well, first we went to a farm and everyone was walking on this trail and my legs, which are short, started to hurt and I sat down. So it's immediately in this question of, did you do this? She sets it up as, my legs are short, they hurt, and I had to sit down. It's like, it's kind of hard to be on her side it's kind of hard not to be on her side after something like that, because, if you have a heart, it's hard not to be like, God, that is a tough hand, I'm sure her legs did hurt. My legs hurt if I go hiking when my legs are long. So, and then it's like a kind of a hypnotize. So she said that her legs hurt and she sat down, and then Christina was like, come on, little, like had no compassion for her legs. And then so she picks up Natalia to be like, come on, we're hiking to see the cows, whether you like it or not. And then as she picks up Natalia, they like both fell into the electric fence. The old, we both fell. And then I want to talk about two. I can't remember if I brought up the part or not, but the family before the Barnetts, and I think this is very suspicious. If it was just the Barnetts, I could believe it. They both seem weird as hell to me. But the family she was with before the Barnetts accused Natalia of trying to break the little boy's arm and like hit a wall with her. And she was like, I cannot do this anymore. And they were like, what happened with that? This is two families now that have said that you did something. And again, she goes into explain voice and speed. And she was like, oh, well, one of her sons and I, we would wrestle. We'd like to wrestle together. And I fell on his arm wrong. And it's the same story every time. The mom came in and was like, what are you doing? So it's just two families in a row that are experienced with dealing with kids and adoptive kids and run like daycare, foster kid things. This is two families in a row being like, what are you doing? And her being like, oh, I just fell on his arm wrong. And with someone with that much experience with kids, I think that you can tell the difference between, oh, they were just wrestling and his arm got tweaked, or this little woman is trying to break my son's arm. And so that one happened before the Barnetts, and so Dr. Phil was like, what does that mean when she said, I'm done with this, I can't do this anymore? Again, it's like all of a sudden Natalia's confused. She's like, oh, I don't know. I'm confused. I was so young and confused. Just nothing. All right. And so I was really just trying to look at facial expressions and micro expressions and the way that she talked to try to get a read on if she's telling the truth. And two situations really caught my eye. And one of them, I actually screamed at my computer, "You're lying! You're lying!" All right, so one of them, he flat out asks her, "Are you a 33-year-old con woman?" Something like that. And again, that's the easiest question to answer, because if she's not 33, which she's probably not, all you can be is like, no. But he should have asked her, have you pretended to be older to stay in the adoption world process thing in order to keep being taken care of? And that one would have been a lot harder. Have you pretended to be older this whole time? And but he was like, "Are you a 33-year-old con woman?" And she gets this like smirk on her face. And then she laughs and she says no, and then her eyes dart, I think, to the right. I don't know, it could be like switched on there. Her eyes dart to the right, and then she does the most evil smirk that I've ever seen. And that one wasn't the one I screamed at my TV about. That one just seemed a little one. And then later in the episode, he's asking her about the knives. And the Barnetts said that she would come into their bedroom and just stand over them. And then when he woke up, he was like, "What are you doing?" And she goes, "I'm going to kill you." And so Phil asked her, did you ever go into their room for any reason to stab them or thinking about stabbing them, or did you? And she goes, "No." And she kind of gets this melodramatic voice whenever it's like, "Oh, I'm being asked about the knives again. I better raise up a couple octaves and make sure I sound not like a 30-year-old. And so he's like, "Did you ever think about stabbing them?" And she goes, "No, never." It almost sounded like, what's his name? There's a director that always does melodrama. It almost sounds like one of his movies where it's like, "No, of course not." Where it's supposed to be comedy. "No, of course not." And then that line of questioning ends with him being like, "So you never went into their room with any other intention, like negative intention or anything?" And she goes, "No, never. Maybe if I ever went into their room, it was because I was scared of a nightmare or something." And she does this cry thing where it's like, she was like, "All right, I'm going to cry." And just nothing happened. She just sprinkles up her face and goes, me. And I think the adoptive mom like squeezed her hand a little more, just be like, "Is this going well?" So she goes, and I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure we have an official lie cry. And so, as the episode came to an end, it became clear that just like a lot of the big questions in life, this one was not going to be answered today. Is she a child? Possibly. Is she an old dwarf that's conning foster families? I think it's possible. And I think probably what's more possible is that her and the Barnetts are pretty weird. And probably the truth, they probably have both done things throughout this whole thing that are wrong, and now they're both trying to just hunker down and try to get the narrative where they're right and the other person. If you watch Natalia the whole interview and think that she's not hiding something or flat out blatantly lying, I just disagree. I don't think that I think that she could easily not be 30. That seemed pretty, but if she's 22 or 23, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Just her facial, the bone structure, you kind of lose your baby face, mid 20s, sometime during the 20s, and to me, she has an adult woman face. But who knows? Let me know what you think. I'm going to cut it off there. I hope you're doing well. Have a nice weekend. I love you all. Why? Stavin' why?